Čest pokututa Krista Krenko. Jak Oscar.
Yes, I bet you have.
As we're rolling, Rebels, welcome back to the Cantina Corner, where we discuss all things Star Wars and sci-fi. And today we're going to discuss why Star Wars just doesn't feel the same anymore and hasn't felt the same for a long time for many people. But before that, please share, subscribe, like this video. We really appreciate all the help we can get. Anyway, so here at the Cantina, I'm having a nice little juicy beverage. They were out of blue milk, so I'm just going with H2O. Goes down smoothly. Okay, so Star Wars. What happened? Why is it different? Well, I think the biggest reason why is because the sequels and the prequels, despite some good things about both, I know that might be kind of controversial to say that depending who I'm talking to, but there's some good things about both of them. The problem is, though, is that the original saga was heavily influenced by ancient mythology. You see, there was a mythologist named Joseph Campbell. Now, he went around the world studying all these different ancient civilizations and cultures and countries and people, and what he discovered, despite all their differences, what he discovered was that they all told stories in a very similar fashion. All their stories seemed to follow this one distinct structure, what he called the monomyth, what we now call the hero's journey. Now, the hero's journey follows a character that goes through a bunch of trials and tribulations, crosses thresholds, meets a mentor, meets allies, learns some wisdom about themselves and about the world around them, uses that wisdom, which is essentially is the theme of the story, uses that wisdom and theme to essentially change themselves and change the world around them. And they go through all these trials, and then at the very, very end, they basically change, and usually for the better. It's a structure. And of course, we know a lot of movies and TV shows and comic books and so on and so forth, they all kind of follow that same structure, but Star Wars was considered to be the first film to really utilize that almost perfectly step by step. In fact, I'll even let Joseph Campbell himself explain.
Well, I think that George Lucas was using standard mythological figures. The old man as the advisor. Well, specifically, what he made me think of is the Japanese sword master.
Remember, a Jedi can feel the Force flowing through him.
I've known some of those people, and this man has a bit their character.
Well, there's something mythological, too, isn't there, in the sense that the hero is helped by this stranger who shows up and gives him some instrument, a sword or a sheaf of light, shaft of light.
He gives him not only a physical instrument, but a psychological commitment and a psychological center.
This time, let go your conscious self and act on instinct.
Well, he had him exercising with that strange weapon and then pulled the mask over. That's real Japanese stuff.
See what I mean? Now, I'll even let George Lucas himself explain it as well.
Well, there's again a mixture of all kinds of mythology and religious beliefs that have been amalgamated into the movie. And I've tried to take the ideas that seem to cut across the most cultures because I'm fascinated by that. And I think that's one of the things that I really got from Joe Campbell was that what he was trying to do is find the common threads through the various mythology, through the religions.
One of the comparisons that came to mind just when I was rewatching the series recently is when Darth Vader tempts Luke to come over to the Empire by offering him all that the Empire has to offer. I was taken back in my own youth to the story of Satan taking Christ to the mountain and offering him the kingdoms of the world if only he would turn away from his mission.
Right.
Was that conscious in your mind?
Well, yeah, I mean, that story also has been retold. The temptation, I mean, Buddha was tempted in the same way. It's all through mythology. I didn't want to invent a religion. I wanted to try to explain in a different way the religions that have already existed.
You're creating a new myth.
Well, I'm telling an old myth in a new way. I'm just taking the core myth and I'm localizing it. As it turns out, I'm localizing it for the planet, but I I guess I'm localizing it for the end of the millennium more than I am for any particular place.
There you go. Now, let's actually look at the hero's journey, and let's look at the step-by-step process and how the original trilogy follows it, okay? So we have Luke Skywalker. He's the farm boy living an unfulfilled life on this empty, mundane planet. And then he has this call to adventure when R2 and 3PO show up with this hologram with Princess Leia saying, I need help and all that. And then he has the grand old wizard who promises to teach him this wisdom and give him this training, discover his inner strength, and help him overcome his weaknesses and prepare him for the galaxy that he's about to confront. Now, of course, Luke rejects it at first, but then after some motivation, like, finding half his family, or the rest of his family fried, he then crosses the threshold and into the new world where he meets up with some allies like Han and Chewie. He goes on this adventure. He enters the innermost cave, which in this case is the Death Star, and there are all these different challenges and steps that he has to go through and use all of his skills and his cleverness to get through. Eventually, he saves the princess, and then he uses that wisdom that his mentor gave him, Obi-Wan, uses that wisdom, like, for example, let go of your, let go, trust your feelings, have faith in the Force, uses that to destroy the Death Star, save the galaxy, defeat the Empire. Okay, Star Wars A New Hope is a perfect example of the monomyth, of the hero's journey. And when you think about it, now here's the deal. George Lucas didn't know if he was ever going to have his complete trilogy, or much less an entire saga. So A New Hope really was made to be a one-off movie. He made it a complete story. And if you watch it, it is a complete story. It stands alone as its own movie. Of course, then the movie was a success, and then you have Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. And in those two movies, the hero's journey continues. Again, Luke is trained by a grand old wizard, this time Yoda. Again, teaches him skills and gives him wisdom about himself and about the galaxy and about the Force. He then uses that wisdom and applies it to when he confronts Vader, okay? And then, of course, at first, what's supposed to be sort of avenging his father's death eventually turns to redeeming his father. And then you see him return the Jedi. He, again, has to not only confront his father, but confront the very man who turned his father to evil. And in that moment, he learns, through his father's mistakes, not to give in to his hatred. That's brought up a lot, to give in to your hatred, turn to the dark side and all that. Luke learns to not give in to his hatred. He learns that he will never turn the dark side, and he will live up to his own father's name. And then, of course, he throws down his lightsaber, confronts the Emperor, and that's when all the wisdom and all the training and all the teaching finally comes to fruition. And in that moment, that's when Vader redeems himself by saving Luke, by killing off the Emperor. And of course, there you go. There's your story. It's a complete hero's journey. The trilogy is based on ancient mythology. It follows the hero's journey step by step, and it works, and that's why it works, is because the hero's journey, the monomyth, that transcends all cultures and all civilizations and all history. I mean, that's embedded in our psychology, in our nature. That's why it works. Okay, so you have that, and then you have the prequel series. The prequels, I would say, visually are heavily inspired by ancient mythology. I mean, if you look at Darth Maul, he looks like Satan, basically. And if you look at Padme, she kind of has this Mother Earth kind of look to her. And you see some ancient civilizations, and as far as, like, the costumes and the set design and all that. Okay, so visually, it looks like it's really drawing upon ancient civilizations and all that. But it doesn't follow the hero's journey. I mean, when you think about it, you look at Phantom Menace, okay, you have this, setup with the embargo, the Trade Federation's holding Naboo hostage practically. Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon escape after some pretty cool action sequences. Okay, they land on Tatooine and they meet Anakin, and unlike Luke went on this adventure, practically this intergalactic road trip, and you see him enter the Death Star, and there are all these trials and challenges that he has to kind of fight his way through. Anakin doesn't have that. For a significant part of the movie is just watching Anakin, fix his pod racer. And then he eventually takes that pod racer and he races for freedom. Okay, it's a fun sequence. It's actually pretty exciting. And then he meets the Jedi Council and they get a feeling that he has some power. Okay, a lot of midichlorians. And then he accidentally gets into a spaceship and destroys the Trade Federation. But at the end of that movie, does Anakin have any wisdom? Did he learn anything? Did Qui-Gon or Obi-Wan give him any deeper meaning? Because don't forget, the wisdom that the mentor gives to the hero is pretty much the theme of the story. Because that's what the hero has to take with him or her to defeat the enemy and bring peace to the galaxy and grow as a character. The wisdom is the theme of the story. So what wisdom does Anakin have at the end of The Phantom Menace. None, really. And that's why that movie doesn't work, because you don't see Anakin going through that step-by-step process of challenges and trials, and then discovering some wisdom, and then using that wisdom to overtake the enemy. He kind of just, they accidentally find him, and then he accidentally destroys the Trade Federation, and then by the end of the movie, he's no different. There's no grand revelation about life or about himself. That's why it doesn't work as a movie. It's just a setup for the next films. Okay, we go to the Attack of the Clones. Okay, Anakin's a little bit older now. All right, there's some action sequences in the beginning, attempted assassination, chase sequence, gotcha, blah, blah, blah. And then Obi-Wan goes on this, investigation of what the clone army is, and then you see Anakin just talking to Padme. And that's what it is for most of the movie, just those two talking about their feelings. Again, you're not seeing Anakin go through these trials and these challenges and learning wisdom. Again, in Empire Strikes Back, Luke is training and learning more about himself and learning more about the galaxy. He's prepping himself for, the big fight with Vader. Anakin doesn't have that. There's a scene where he goes to save his mother, and he fails to save her, and then we see him kill the Sand People, and that's sort of the early signs that he's turning evil. But that's not really a trial or a challenge. We're more observing him. We're observing his behavior. Again, we're not seeing this step-by-step process of him learning wisdom and overcoming his personal weaknesses. Luke had to come over his weaknesses. He had to overcome those in order to, become stronger and wiser. We're not seeing that with Anakin. And then by Revenge of the Sith, at least we now see a personal motivation. And this is a big deal. Now think about this for a second. In A New Hope, Luke had a goal. A very distinct goal, which was to, leave his boring life, but also to become a Jedi like his father, which he flat out says to Obi-Wan, to learn the ways of the Force, to become a Jedi like my father, okay? And then he's really there to basically avenge both his father's death, at least at that time he thought his father's death, but also his surrogate father's death, because Obi-Wan was killed. So he's avenging their death, and he's learning to finally have faith. There is a very distinct goal. And then in Empire Strikes Back, it's to train, and then, of course, to avenge his father's death and save his friends. And then by Return of the Jedi, it changes to redeeming his father. So he has a very distinct goal in these movies. What's Anakin's distinct goal in Phantom Menace? Okay, because to be free? Okay, he frees himself halfway through the movie. Then what's the goal for the rest of the movie? Doesn't really have one. Okay, Attack of the Clones. What's his goal? To seduce Padme? Kind of. I mean, he eventually wants to save his mother, but that's not the goal for the whole movie. That's just sort of like one little aspect of it, and then it's over, and then what else? He doesn't have a distinct goal to pursue, and that's why there's no story. You can't have a story unless your protagonist is specifically pursuing something. I mean, Obi-Wan's kind of pursuing something, but that's not a personal journey. That's more just his job. He's a Jedi. He's investigating something. So again, there's no journey. Okay, and then it kind of ends on this big action sequence and all that, and then we get Revenge of the Sith. Now Anakin kind of has a personal journey, because now that, we know how much his mother's death affected him, and he fears that Padme will die, so now he has a personal mission, and that's why it's easy for Emperor Palpatine to seduce him to the dark side, and then we start to see this. But again, we're not really seeing Anakin go through trials and challenges. Again, we're just observing him as he's stuck in a situation where he's being seduced. But again, you're not seeing a trial and challenges to overcome his weaknesses. We're just observing him turn to the dark side. It's still a fun movie, but it's not following that hero's journey. It's not following that process. We're more just observing the change of his character and how he's easily seduced. So it's still fun, still a lot of action, but it's not that mythical journey. And that's why the prequels don't work for a lot of people. Okay, so now let's get to the sequel series. All right. Now, in the sequel series, Rey starts off very much like Luke. She's living this very unfulfilled life on a mundane planet, hoping for some sort of... Well, she's not actually looking for adventure. She's waiting for her family to show up. So again, not the same thing. The reason why Luke was so appealing to us is because we all feel like we're living a boring life and we want to adventure and to go somewhere and do something. Rey doesn't. She's just waiting for somebody to come pick her up. Doesn't really make her very compelling, but okay, we'll kind of let it go. The call to adventure comes to her. She, like Luke, rejects it at first. When they're on, the Millennium Falcon, she's still saying, I gotta fix the ship to get back to Jakku to wait for her family. Okay. And then when they finally, get to that little bar that's kind of like based on Mos Eisley a little bit, again, she's refusing the call to adventure, even though that Luke's lightsaber was kind of calling to her. And then she gets kidnapped by Kylo. We discover she has powers, and she watches Han die, fights Kylo, and then goes to look for Luke. Not really a journey, to be honest. She's kind of just along for the ride. And there's some action sequences where, like, those big, I forgot what they're called, but those big octopus rolling ball things are eating people. Okay, that's kind of exciting. So you could say that's a challenge. Okay. But there's a very distinct difference between Luke entering the Death Star, which is basically, the villain's main weapon, and it's also where Leia's being held, so it's kind of more connected directly to the plot. Compare that to the coincidence of just Han Solo finding them and then these monsters are let loose. It's a fun action sequence, but it's not necessarily it's not connected to the main plot. Running through the Death Star is more connected directly to the plot. And also, metaphorically, it represents the, quote, innermost cave, the cave that the hero must always enter, like when Beowulf entered the cave to fight the dragon. This is just, an action sequence that she kind of just fell into. It's not really the same thing. It doesn't have the same compelling impact. And it's not as well connected to the main story. And then again, she discovers these inner powers in herself, but it's like a typical J.J. Abrams story. It's all mystery. There's no answer. There are no answers. We're kind of just left to wait for the sequel. And that's the difference. Force Awakens can't really stand alone as a film. A New Hope can stand alone as a film because it was made to be just one film. Force Awakens is clearly made to just be the setup for the rest of the trilogy. Not to say that it wasn't fun or exciting, but it's incomplete. It's all mystery and no answers. And again, you're not seeing Rey go through these steps and these trials and discovering wisdom. Did she discover any wisdom at the end of the movie? No, not really. Did she apply any wisdom? No. Did she have any answers? No. Did she grow as a character? No. She's exactly the same way as she was at the beginning of the movie. She just now realizes she has powers but doesn't know why. Okay, so we go to The Last Jedi. So for most of the movie, she's not really doing anything except just hanging out with a miserable old man, and we'll get to that in a second. But again, she's not really training. There's a short training sequence with Luke, but it doesn't last very long. And again, compare that to Yoda. Yoda was giving Luke a lot of wisdom and really showing him how to use the Force and really showing him how to overcome his weaknesses and overcome, his lack of confidence in himself. Really teaching him how to have faith in himself and the Force. You don't see that with Luke. She's just kind of there and he's just being miserable. And then for some reason she wants to save Kylo. Why? It's kind of like they're kind of trying to make a connection to like Return of the Jedi when Luke was trying to save Vader, but Rey trying to save Kylo doesn't have the same effect because they barely know each other. What's the motivation to save Kylo? He's completely unlikable, and Vader, we actually, at least in the original series, we know that that's Luke's father. There's a reason to save him, but there's no connection between Rey and Kylo. So what's the motivation? Why? What is her main goal? To find her parents? Okay, I guess, because we figure that her parents are going to be somehow connected to all this, but then we find out her parents are not connected to all this, so she's literally here by accident. She's just here by accident, and there's no explanation as to why she has all these powers. Luke had to be trained and to discover these. That was part of his journey and growth as a character. She has no growth. She's exactly the same as she was in the first film. Nothing's changing. There are no answers to any of this. It's just a pure accident. And because of that, she's not learning in a wisdom, there's no story. You can't have a story unless your character is specifically pursuing a goal and growing from that, and learning something from that, reaching some sort of revelation. She's not. She's just told, let go of the past. Which feels more like Rian Johnson trying to beat the fans over the head with his personal message, not the message of the movie. Because, okay, if Rey forgets about her parents, then so what? It still doesn't answer anything. She still doesn't grow as a character. There's no wisdom that she's learned that she's applying to the galaxy. Remember that scene in A New Hope? When Luke's flying the X-Wing, he's about to blow the Death Star, and Obi-Wan's voice tells him, let go, Luke. Trust your feelings. Or, Luke, trust me. Use the Force. It's about having faith. What does Rey learn? What is she doing? What wisdom does she have? None. And she's not going through those steps and those trials. You're not seeing the process. And that's why it doesn't work for a lot of people. And considering the fact that she has no weaknesses, what's there to fear? What's there to worry about? Luke had weaknesses. Remember this. When Luke went to face Vader for the first time, Yoda and Kenobi both told him he's not ready. But Luke refused to listen to them. He was not going to sacrifice his friends, which again, we'll get to that later. And when he first faced Vader, he got his butt kicked. He lost a hand. And he had to come back to face Vader again. Rey has defeated Kylo Ren twice. and she's much more powerful than him. So again, where's the journey? Where's the story? Why should we worry? Why should we care? What are the answers? There's just nothing. She's just too perfect. No flaws, no weaknesses, nothing to overcome. There's no weakness to overcome. There's nothing to learn. So there's no story. Okay, I've talked about her enough, but now let's move on. Let's talk about the supporting characters. Now, if you go back to the original series, okay, Han Solo starts off as this selfish, arrogant, egomaniac, all about himself, not about causes, okay? But over the course of the film, over the course of the series, he learns to care, to care less about himself and care more about other people. Okay, both Leia and the cause. Leia is a perfect contrast to Han Solo. She's all about the cause and not about herself. She completely ignores her own feelings and her own desires. So they're on the perfect, opposite ends of the spectrum here. So Han Solo is all about himself, not about the cause or anyone else. Leia is all about the cause and everyone else, but not about herself. So they meet in the middle. Perfect love story, perfect contrast. They both learn to, care for one another or for their own desires. Okay. If you look at Obi-Wan Kenobi, he's on a mission of redemption. Don't forget, originally how the story was set up was that Vader was his pupil who killed his other pupil, Anakin, who was also his best friend. So this is a way of not only avenging his friend's death, but avenging himself and basically redeeming himself for training this monster. Okay. And then later it's revealed that, of course, Vader's, actually Anakin, and now this is more about Obi-Wan teaching Luke, you have to kill Vader in order to sort of redeem me again, because he still created this monster. Obi-Wan's responsible for the creation of Darth Vader, in a sense. Or, as he would say, from a certain point of view. So Obi-Wan has a mission. Okay. Now, and of course, there's Vader, where you can still, of course, he has this hatred that he has to overcome, and by the end of the movie, when he sees what Luke does for him, he changes. And again, we're going to get to that. I'm holding off on sequel Luke until the end. Okay. Now, if you look at the prequels, Obi-Wan doesn't change until Revenge of the Sith. Again, you look at the prequels. The first two prequel films are basically a setup for Revenge of the Sith. Obi-Wan doesn't really change, doesn't really go through any journey, doesn't really have a real deep personal mission like he does in the original series. It's not really to the end of Revenge of the Sith that you finally see how this has all affected him, and then you see the pain that he's going through, realizing that his kind of surrogate brother Anakin has turned to the dark side, and Obi-Wan blames himself. So really, again, kind of like Anakin, you just see the first two films are just kind of. You're just observing Kenobi as he's kind of just pushing the plot along, and then finally by the end of the third one, you finally see how this all affects him. So again, not really a journey for him. And I'm not criticizing Ewan McGregor, but it's not McGregor's fault at all. He did a great performance. Don't get me wrong, but you're not really seeing a journey for him. There is no personal journey for him, not at least until the third film. Okay, now let's get to the sequels. Finn starts off kind of like a Solo in the sense that he's not really a swashbuckler, he's not arrogant, he's not cool, but he's kind of selfish and all thinking about himself, and he's kind of a coward. He doesn't care about causes, he just wants to run off and escape. And then by the end of Force Awakens, he learns he's not really fighting for the greater cause, he's really just fighting for Rey, his friend. He doesn't care about the cause. Okay, and then by Last Jedi, again, he starts off just thinking about Rey, okay, and which you can admire him for, because he really does care about Rey. In fact, you can make the argument he might be in love with her. We don't really know. It's kind of implied, not really, but, But by the end of Last Jedi, he finally is willing to sacrifice himself for the cause, so you figured, okay, he's kind of coming into full circle here, full fruition, is that he's actually going to fight for the greater good, which is something he was kind of avoiding, throughout the first two films. But then Rose Tico comes along and crashes into his ship, which, by the way, could have killed both of them. So that kind of, it's just kind of a contradiction, because she crashes into him to stop him from killing himself, which is like, you're going to kill him to stop him from killing himself, which doesn't work. And then, of course, she says to him that, we're not going to win this war by killing what we hate, but saving what we love, which doesn't make any sense, because this is war. You're going to save people by killing your enemy, because your enemies are going to kill the people that you love. So that doesn't make any sense. And not to mention, just a few minutes prior, Holdo sacrificed herself by saving everyone. So, again, that doesn't make any sense. This Rose is kind of contradicting the whole movie. And not to mention she almost killed Finn. I already said that. But then again, when you actually look at Rose, she's actually set up to be an interesting character. I actually really liked her the first time I saw her because she had a personal motivation. Her sister had just died. She later reveals that she and her sister kind of grew up in slavery. So she, again, has this personal vendetta against the First Order, which gives her a lot of motivation and gives her some depth, and she was actually quite sympathetic and likable. But what does she do? She frees the horse dogs, okay, crashes through a window, knocks over a bunch of gambling tables, and then releases the horse dogs into the wild. Okay. But she didn't save the slave children, even though she just said herself that she used to be a slave. So that's kind of weird. So she just leaves the slave children in the horse stable, but releases all the horse dogs. Not to mention, she broke a window and knocked over some tables. Okay, well, those rich people will just fix the window, turn the tables back over, go back to gambling. I mean, what did you do? You just inconvenienced them. And not to mention, those rich people, as she mentioned, they kind of made their money from making weapons and ships. I'm pretty sure they'll just go back and capture those animals like they did before and put them back in the kettle. So she didn't really accomplish anything, and then she kind of contradicts herself when she crashes into Finn. So she's not really a complete character. And then we got Poe. Okay, Force Awakens, he doesn't really do anything, but Last Jedi, okay, we got kind of a journey where he's learning to not be such a hot shot. It's not all about blowing things up and being, the action hero. Okay, I can kind of understand that, except that doesn't work because Poe was right. Yeah, I'm saying that out loud. Poe was right. If Poe had not blown up the Dreadnought in the first 5 minutes of the movie, then the Dreadnought would have followed the Resistance through hyperspace, and then Kylo Ren would have gone in there, blown up all the fighters and bombers. Remember, Kylo Ren goes in there and destroys all of the Resistance fighters before they even have a chance to get out. So if they hadn't blown the Dreadnought would have followed them. Kylo Ren would have gone in there, blown up all the bombers and all the Resistance fighters before they could take off, which then means the whole Resistance fleet would be at the mercy of the Dreadnought, which means they probably would all die. And of course it doesn't make sense that, when I shouldn't say Kylo Ren, but Kylo Ren blows up one ship, almost blows up his mother, okay, so, he has some death because he can't really bring himself to kill his mom, but the 2 TIE fighters come in, they blow up the bridge, and Leia flies out the window. Why did they just continue blowing up all the ships? They could have just ended the movie right then. It doesn't make sense that the Kylo and the 2 TIE fighters don't just continue blowing everything up. Okay, they just blew up one ship, they blew up all the Resistance fighters, they just blew Leia out of the cockpit, or off the bridge, why don't you just keep going? Doesn't really make sense. Anyway, that's on a tangent here. But back to Poe. So, technically speaking, Poe was right. And not to mention, General Leia, and let me repeat that, General Leia could have just called all the bombers back. If she didn't want the bombers to continue on the mission, she has a radio. She could have just called all of them and told them to come back. And that's one thing that really bothers me about The Last Jedi, is that Leia, well, actually, throughout the whole sequel series, Leia doesn't do anything. She does nothing in The Force Awakens. She's only in 2 or 3 scenes and does nothing. Last Jedi, she's there for the opening. She gets knocked out, and then she comes back at the end. She does nothing. She's done nothing. She herself has no journey. And now, of course, Carrie Fisher's passed away, which is heartbreaking. So now they're just going to use some stock footage and just put her in there, and it's just such a shame. It really is. Anyway, now the moment we've all been waiting for: Luke Skywalker, or should I say, Jake Skywalker. I would like to make one point starting off. Now, if you like The Last Jedi, that's fine. I'm not going to criticize you, attack you for liking The Last Jedi. There are some parts of it I do like. It's visually stunning, it's well acted, lots of action. Okay. But that's not Luke Skywalker. And Mark Hamill himself publicly stated he did not play him as Luke Skywalker, and he, quote, fundamentally disagreed with everything Rian Johnson was doing. Just keep that in mind, that when you watch The Last Jedi, you're not watching Luke Skywalker, because the man who played him even says that's not Luke. Now keep this in mind. In the original series, Luke was always willing to sacrifice himself to save people, even people he didn't know. Think about this. In A New Hope, he didn't even know Princess Leia. All he knew of her was that all he saw of her previously was just she was a little hologram. Okay, that was it. But he was willing to save her because he knew it was the right thing to do. Okay? In Empire Strikes Back, despite the fact that both Kenobi and Yoda both told Luke that he was not ready to face Vader, he refused to let both Han and Leia die. He refused to sacrifice them. That meant he was going to sacrifice himself to save his friends. In Return of the Jedi, despite the fact that he knows just how evil his father is, he knows how evil Vader is. He even says, but he says to him, "I can feel the good in you. Just let go of your hatred." He's willing to die to save his father. He throws down his lightsaber in front of the Emperor and says that you failed, Your Highness. I'm a Jedi just like my father. He won't turn to the dark side. He won't give in to his hatred. He's willing to die for his father, despite the fact that all the horrible things his father's done. That's Luke. So what changed in Last Jedi? He's willing to let Leia and Han die and let the whole galaxy be destroyed from his nephew. He's not willing to sacrifice anymore. Why? Because he feels guilt for creating Kylo? Fine. Okay, he feels guilt, but still, he still has a responsibility. He still has a responsibility to fix this. It doesn't make any sense that now he's going to give up on everybody. He's going to give up on his sister. He's going to give up on his best friend. And Rian Johnson defended this, saying, "Well, no, it's not that he's giving up. It's not that he's a coward. He just thinks that if he's involved in this, he's just going to make things worse." That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. That's just not who Luke is. That's not who Luke is. Always willing to sacrifice himself. Now all of a sudden he just doesn't want to anymore. Why? Because Rian Johnson says he doesn't want to anymore. Just doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's a complete contradiction of who Luke has always been. And not to mention that scene where he was about to kill Kylo in his sleep. Now that's a big pill to swallow. Despite the fact that he knows all the evil that his father did, he refused to kill his father. But he notices that Kylo's having a bad dream, and all of a sudden he's about to stab him in his sleep like a creepy uncle. It just doesn't make any sense, because that means that Luke is throwing out his entire journey in one moment. It's hard to believe that. I know some people say, well, Return of the Jedi, he had a moment where he almost killed Vader. True, but that's different, because he was already fighting Vader. And Vader threatened to convert Leia to the dark side. And he knew just how evil Vader was. He knew Vader could do it. So yeah, he had a moment. But then he stopped, and he had that moment where he realized, okay, I shouldn't do this anymore. He turned off the lightsaber and threw it down. That was the moment he was saying, I'm not going to let my hatred take over. So what happened with Kylo? All of a sudden he just forgot all that? Well, then if he forgot all that, then what the hell was the point of the whole journey? And even if he did do that, why would he not try to make amends for it? Don't you think that if he would have faced Snoke and confront Kylo and say, look, I made a mistake, Kylo, I didn't, or Ben, you probably call him Ben. He said, look, Ben, I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry, I had a moment of weakness, but to prove to you that I'm here for you, that I truly do love you, I'm not going to fight you. I'm going to sacrifice myself just to show you that Snoke is the one manipulating you. I'm sorry, I'm not convinced that Luke would not sacrifice himself again to save the one that he loved, to save his nephew. And by the way, keep in mind, Kylo or Ben only had bad dreams. He hadn't killed anybody yet. He hadn't done anything evil yet. So again, it doesn't make sense that Luke would have this dramatic change. It just doesn't make sense. And anyway, that's why I think the sequel series and the prequel series just don't feel like Star Wars, because they're not based on mythology anymore. The sequels are a lot of action, a lot of mystery, but no answers, and a lot of contradictions. It's just contradicting the entire purpose of Star Wars. And I know Rian Johnson is saying, well, it's subverting expectations. And I think recently Frank Oz, who plays the voice of Yoda, he said it's all about subverting expectations. Okay, yeah, subverting expectations can be fine, and we can appreciate it, because we don't want things to be, repetitive, even though Last Jedi really does rip off several sequences from Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. It's really not that original. But yeah, as much as we can appreciate subverting expectations, the problem is, though, subverting expectations is just a gimmick. It's like a jump scare. Yeah, a few times it gets you, and you're like, oh, wow, surprise, okay. But it doesn't make it good storytelling. After a while, it just kind of comes off lazy. It comes off like a sign, as though the writer and director don't know what they're doing, so they're just going to say, all right, let's just do this. Let's just surprise you. So, and if you keep subverting expectations, eventually you're just going to subvert the entire story, the characters, the mythology, and the entire saga, and all the work that hundreds of people put in before you showed up to make your movie. Just saying. So again, to wrap it all up, the original series was a journey in which a character, Luke Skywalker, goes through all these trials, a step-by-step process of going through these trials, entering an unknown world, learning wisdom, and then using that wisdom and applying that wisdom, and of course, avenging his father's sins, avenging his father's soul, saving his father. Okay? There was a goal throughout this entire series, a very distinct goal. It kind of changed, but it was still the same goal. In the prequels, it's just an observation of how Anakin falls apart, but you're not seeing these trials, you're not seeing the wisdom being applied. Okay, you do see him fall apart, and you understand by the third film why he's falling apart, but again, you're not seeing this step-by-step process in which he is growing as a character. You're just kind of just observing him fall apart. You're observing behavior, and it's a lot of exposition. That's the problem with the prequels, that it's mostly just exposition throughout all of it. And then a lot of action. And then with the sequels, again, we have the setup where there's a lot of mystery, but also a lot of unanswered questions. But again, you're not seeing Rey go through this process because she's already all-powerful. She already has wisdom. I mean, well, to be honest, she doesn't learn any wisdom. She's just all-powerful, all-knowing, all-perfect, has no weaknesses to overcome, no real challenges. No one can defeat her. She's just superhuman. And that's not a story. You can't have a story if your protagonist is already perfect. They had to have weaknesses to overcome, to learn something, and to use what they have learned in the story to right all the wrongs. She doesn't. She doesn't really have a purpose. She doesn't have any real motivation to be here. She's just here by accident. That's the complete antithesis of storytelling and mythology. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Be sure to look in the description for the link to the Movie Magnum magazine website. Be sure to subscribe, and until then, be cool, stay cool.
Česko kututa Krista Krenko. Jak Oscar.
Yes, I bet you have.